now the version of it without the mute on. Councillor Alexander, Councillor Bissett, Councillor Colley, Councillor Coombs, Councillor Garner, Councillor Harris, Councillor McHugh, Councillor Meiklejohn, Councillor Monroe, Councillor Nicholl, Councillor Nimmo, and Councillor Reid. And also present in the call is Councillor Bowes as portfolio holder in relation to agenda item 6. And the officers we have present are Kenneth Laurie, Chief Executive, Stuart Ritchie, Director of Corporate and Housing Services, Rona Geisler, Director of Development Services, Robert Naylor, Director of Children's Services, and Patricia Cassidy, Chief Officer of the Health and Social Care Partnership. We also have on the call Ryan Smale, Chief Finance Officer, myself, Colin Moody, Chief Governance Officer, and we're also joined by Jack Frawley, who is the team leader in committee services. And I should say, for the purpose of the recording, that Patricia and Rona will remain for agenda item 3 only.
Okay, thank you for that, Colin. Can I ask people to please remind to mute themselves when they're not speaking, and it just helps to prevent any feedback in the process as we go forward. So I think we don't have any apologies. I think we have a full complement of members present. So I will ask if there are any declarations of interest, financial or non-financial, on any item of business that's before us today. No? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 3, coronavirus update. I'm going to go to Kenneth Laurie, Chief Executive, to speak to the report.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, everybody. And can I start off by thanking Rona Geisler for pulling together this update report, as well as providing a brief introduction and background, including the main national policy interventions which elected members will be broadly familiar with. This report really has 3 main elements to it. There are some details of the resilience structures and the approach, and Rona is well placed to cover in relation to that. There's also, in terms of the range of actions across council services in the Health and Social Care Partnership, and indeed in the Trust, that have been undertaken in response to the crisis. And I think that also illustrates the scale of the challenge that we have faced. We have endeavoured to keep elected members updated throughout the last couple of months on all of this, including some detailed briefings. So I don't intend to go into detail in terms of our response to date on this occasion, but both I and my colleagues at this meeting would be very happy to answer any questions in relation to service issues. What I would say at this stage is that the efforts of our employees working with partner organisations in the third sector and volunteers has been remarkable, particularly on the front line. And people have taken on new challenges, worked exceptionally long hours, and have demonstrated a huge commitment and energy and kindness and support to communities, to service users, and indeed to each other. And I'm very grateful for all of that. The third element of the report is about recovery and returning to business as usual. And the report reflects on some of the successes in relation to providing services through people working at home and the use of technology. But in terms of recovery itself, I think it's worth noting that in various service areas, and probably particularly health and social care, we're still very much in the response mode to this crisis at the current time. But at the same time, it's clearly very important that we are starting on our recovery journey. For all of the challenges of the last few months, the period of recovery will inevitably be a long one, and in large part that will be determined by national guidance and decisions beyond our immediate control. It is also likely to be difficult and challenging, and will require us as a local authority to fundamentally review our priorities, our service provision, our programme, and indeed our financial position. Because aside from the tragic loss of life, the impact on communities in terms of their vulnerability and well-being, in terms of poverty and inequalities, the impact on business and employment and the health of our economy, the impacts on education and health and other key sectors will need to be considered. And the report provides a schematic of how the Council, working with partners, will tackle that process of recovery. And in all of this, our ambition should not simply be to put back in place the services, the approach, the structures that we had previously. Our aim has to be to build back better, to ensure we learn the lessons of our recent experience in relation to supporting and working with communities, in terms of the use of digital technology, use of buildings, in terms of how we provide excellence in education and drive forward integration and support economic regeneration and protecting the vulnerable in our communities. In turn, will of course feed through to our corporate plan priorities. It will reshape our programme of transformation, our medium-term financial plan, and our workforce plans. In conclusion, the pandemic has presented us with some unique challenges over the last number of months. I think in general it's accepted that the public sector has responded well and quickly to the difficulties faced, and as a council, for all of the challenges that we have had, I do think that a lot of very good and positive work has been done. But the greatest challenge perhaps lies ahead of us, and that is about, as I say, about recovery and about planning for a better future. Doing all that, I think it's really important we reflect on the grief, the concern, the hardship, the disruption that has affected the well-being of our communities and indeed some of our employees as we plan for the future. So, Convener, that's quite a high-level introduction to the report. Myself and my colleagues are open to any questions which members of the committee may wish to ask.
Thank you for that, Kenneth, and for the overview in relation to the report. And I concur with everything you've said, and notwithstanding the statements at full council last week, I think to reiterate that our thanks to the staff and pulling together such a comprehensive response plan, and indeed to our communities for rising to the bar and setting that level of community response has to be recognised, and particularly to those that are very much working and still continue to work and will have to continue to support the front line in delivering some of the very critical services. I think the response by the council has been very comprehensive in addressing the response that was required in that initial phase. It may have felt disorganised, and I'm sure that members must have reflected on that, but the sheer nature of the dynamic situation and the speed in which things were changing meant that the council had to adapt very quickly. And as a result, it may have appeared certainly a bit not joined up, but those are the lessons that we can learn, and a lot of that information is being captured right now and informing the plans as we go forward. There will also be an opportunity for elected members to participate in that business planning process for such contingencies in the future to update that as we go forward and look at those, but that is probably for a different time. Right now, we are moving from the response mode in most cases, with the exception of a Health and Social Care Partnership, who still remain in that, looking towards the recovery phase. And that is now where we need to have our focus. It's important that as a local authority we take a leadership role in that, and actually demonstrate some strength and direction in going forward, and bring in our communities to support on all of that, because they're going to be critical to our recovery and on all of this. Therefore, it's important we have a plan, a roadmap to actually take us into recovery and start to get us back into what will be the new normal, where the council as an organisation can start and do its business, but also that we can look to stimulate the economy and identify where our priorities are going to be key in going forward, particularly around welfare and poverty. Therefore, what I've proposed by way of a motion that I think is now being circulated to everybody is at the start of that roadmap, and asking for a series of reports to come forward to the executive. Some of those I anticipate will require some work to be done before the reports come forward, that will involve elected members becoming involved. For example, strategic property review needs to be revisited, and there's been some early discussions with officers about how we can facilitate the forum by virtual meetings, as we'd had previously, in order to have the input there. Our empowered communities, we need to work with not just the elected members, but with our communities in developing what that will look like going forward. But we need to have a framework in which to work with, and that'd be the initial work that we'd ask that officers bring forward. Economic development, getting businesses back into working mode and stimulating the economy, retaining as many jobs as possible, and supporting the development of new jobs in areas that are going to emerge, I have no doubt, as we go forward, is going to be key, as well as our larger projects such as the investment zone and our TIF. These are going to be key to the stimulation of the economy, and all of that needs to be revisited and brought forward to members with a clear way forward for us. Notwithstanding the Falkirk Community Trust, they are going to be significantly hit as a result of this pandemic, and indeed the longer term requirement for social distancing. Therefore, there needs to be a recovery plan around the trust, and to look at how it may operate in the future, considering the different climate that we're going to be in. I would want this roadmap and all of these areas to be inclusive, and I would like us to be able to move forward together as a council in demonstrating that strong leadership to our communities, to our citizens, that we work in unison. And I would want to have this as inclusive by all members as much as possible in going forward. So I would hope that the committee will be able to support the motion as a roadmap in order to take us beyond this pandemic and actually stimulate our economies, get our communities back on an even keel, and be able to support our most vulnerable. I'm going to open it up now for any questions or comments. Once I can see everybody again. Two ways of indicating, just by raising your hand, or there's a chat bar at the side if people want to actually indicate. Councillor Bissett, you want to come in?
Thank you, Convener. I'll come to your motion last, but I'd just like to make a few comments. I'd first of all just like to say thank you to Kenneth for his quality report, outlining the standing role that local government has played and will continue to play in this pandemic. I think the speed with which the council teams adapted to the challenge shows the expertise and flexibility and indeed the willingness we have within the council to ensure the citizens of Falkirk District are given all the support and services we can muster. Hopefully the efforts and resilience of local government is fully recognised going forward. We have, as you say, supported local businesses to the tune of 17 million since April, and the support for People team working with the voluntary sector has indeed provided invaluable help and shown compassion for the most vulnerable. Children's services adapted very quickly, and now we see 2,500 meal bags are being distributed across 30 sites, ensuring children are always properly fed and don't go to bed hungry. The trade unions have worked well with the council, and I just want to acknowledge their critical and valuable input to this programme of service adaptation and reconfiguration. So now, as we tentatively look to the future, we need a joined up collaborative recovery plan where we show great leadership. This report shows the outline of what that will look like. Our recovery plan will of course be interlinked to the Scottish and UK recovery plan. What we do need to see is a granular breakdown of the income and expenditure since lockdown and what the implications will be for the council going forward. As we know, we have another budget gap to face this year. I believe in the first instance, financial reports will initially come to the group leaders for discussion, and I welcome that. We do need to get back to some sort of normality, and I'm sure this will become clearer over the next few weeks. And again express my sincere, heartfelt condolences to those in our area and wider who have lost loved ones. And we agree with the recommendations in the report. And now just turning to the motion. I thank Cecil for sight of that motion, and we've shared it with the group and we've had a discussion about it, and we're quite happy to agree the motion going forward. It does provide the bones of a recovery plan, and I was delighted to hear that there will be collaboration on it and that we can work together for the people that we serve. And the only question I would ask is that, do we actually need a recess? I've heard that a few times from people, so we're effectively at home. So coming up to the recess, there's discussion by a number of people that do we actually need to go into a recess, or would we continue with the emergency executive as is? Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I assume you mean the summer recess throughout, so it would be July, August. Yes. Is that correct? Yeah. Yes. I will ask either Mr. Moody or Kenneth to respond to the requirement to have that. But my understanding is, irrespective of formal meetings, work would be expected to continue. But I'll ask Mr. Moody for his view.
Thank you, Convener. At the moment, the Council decision of last week, which establishes this committee, anticipates that the committee will only stay in force until the end of June, and that the normal governance structure will recommence in August after the normal summer recess. So that's the terms of the decision as it stands just now. That's not fixed forever in tablets of stone. If experience showed that this executive sitting on a regular basis was advantageous, it could be something that could be reconsidered at a later date. So perhaps if we could pursue that discussion further elsewhere among group leaders, we might see if a consensus emerges on that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Moody. I think that if there's a requirement for business to be transacted because of the current circumstances during that time, then it would be prudent to find a way of being able to do that rather than hold things up and going forward. Okay, Councillor Garner.
Just before Councillor Munro comes in, I'd just like to second the motion and echo the council leaders' statements, comments. Thank you.
Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Convener. The report is a brief snapshot of of a huge amount of work over an unprecedented I've lost the words here. I think the report tries to encompass all the work that many people have done over a very long time, and tries to give us a way forward. And I think that your motion also sets in train the idea that we need now to plan for the future, whilst still in many ways trying to deal with this difficult situation. The cost of COVID-19 in recent months in lives and livelihoods has been enormous, and the damage in terms of jobs and business, with huge amounts of funding needed to support them, has meant that the country is in some ways going to need something following on to help boost the economy too. So as a council, we need to closely examine our finances and assess the cost of this crisis on the functions and the facilities we provide. And so to this end, we do need new goals, a revised financial plan, and to ensure that we embrace new ways of working to change and meet the demands put upon us by having less funding and possibly dealing with COVID for some long time to come. So I think the motion you've put forward is a sensible one. On the comments Robert made about recess, I must confess I agree with him. If we are all going to be home and action needs to be taken quickly, then clearly we should all participate in trying to move forward with the suggestions you've made in terms of what happens next together, and nobody's going on holiday, are they? So thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. I think you're right. The holidays are going to be very much at home this year, and it is also right that people do get the opportunity to have a break and do something different, in the hope that we will not be in lockdown for forevermore. Councillor Colley, you wanted to come in.
Yes, thank you. I want to be. I'll be brief. But I think as well as that, echoing the thanks to all the officers involved. I think I wanted to say specifically about the work of the Health and Social Care Partnership. It's been a huge response, and Patricia and her team have responded admirably. And I think I wanted to put that on record. All of our staff across the Health and Social Care Partnership have worked extremely hard to support people in our communities, and I think that we as a council need to put that on record, how much we appreciate that. And I think also alongside that, the response of our the volunteers and the community effort that has also supported people across our district, but also the most vulnerable that the partnership is also supporting. So I just wanted to put that on record and say thank you to Patricia and her team.
Thank you for that, Fiona. I absolutely 100% agree, and the Health and Social Care Partnership are still very much at the forefront of things and will be for some time to come. And our heartfelt thanks go out to the staff that are delivering those critical services. And we, as a council, as a wider council, we will need to continue for some time yet to support them in doing that and be able to continue to deliver that service to our most vulnerable. Thank you. Councillor Coombs, you wanted to come in? Councillor Coombs?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Am I on?
Yeah.
Off mute now.
You're off mute.
Thank you. Only we could do that all the rest of the time. Fiona's more or less, I was just going to say thanks to everybody. The first one I had mentioned, well, that came to my mind was in the report that we've got from everybody, I think that it hasn't been mentioned, but I think the changes that were made for allocations for housing, the fact that we are looking after the most vulnerable and only allocating houses to those in the emergencies that they're in, I think that we all know that if life's been bad for people before this crisis, then it's absolutely deplorable what some people are going through just now. So I would just like to recognise the changes that have been made there. Also, as I say, it was just to say what Fiona said, an official thank you to all the staff. I get the care workers, the children's services, development services, the staff that moved from grounds maintenance to helping with crematorium and everything. I think there's an awful lot of unsung heroes within the council, and I think that it's important that we as members make official recognition to say thanks, so that directors can feed that back to all the staff. The same, and again, obviously we've had a trust board meeting, and most of the staff are now, my neighbour's cutting his grass. I don't know if anybody else can hear that as well. Sorry, apologies, I couldn't control that. As I say, there's a lot of staff that are unrecognised, but they are out there bursting a gut to help us to do what we need to do to get through this difficult time. And that was all. It was just to really recognise that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Coombs. Is there any other member who wishes to come in? We're happy to agree the report and the motion. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. We move to item 4, which is the Council of the Future report, Connected Falkirk, and I think Robert Naylor is going to take this one. Robert?
Thank you, Convener. As members are aware, we've been working to develop the Connected Falkirk strategy for a number of months, and there were a number of presentations made in the early part of this year in the Council chamber to familiarise members with the ambition that we have for the Connected Falkirk project. At the Council budget meeting in February, there was provisional agreement of the capital expenditure over a 5-year period, and at that time the decision of Council within the budget meeting was that the matter for expenditure of the first year's funding be referred to the Education, Children and Young People Executive, which would have happened on the 26th of March, but for the lockdown arrangements coming in immediately before that. The report in front of you has been amended slightly from that which would have appeared in March, not least because the situation has changed in terms of the requirement for digital learning as a result of the COVID situation. We've added a bit in the report just to reflect the growing imperative for us to make this investment and to proceed as quickly as we possibly can with the rollout of both improved Wi-Fi connectivity in our schools, but most importantly, the provision of devices for our young people that will provide some equity in terms of the opportunity for them to engage with online and digital learning, both on and offline. Over the recent number of weeks, our head teachers, our teachers, centrally based officers have been working extremely hard to support schools to work with children and families on digital learning. We have been making use of a variety of different platforms, not just Glow, which everyone is familiar with, but there's been increased use of Microsoft Teams, of Google Classroom, and other online learning activity in terms of primary and secondary. Primary children are using something called Seesaw in a very significant way. In terms of the report, the background is set out in section 3, and I would draw your attention in particular to paragraph 3.3, which sets out the broad aspirations of the project in terms of what difference this can make to the learner journey, and also indicates in some detail the aspiration here for us to have equity of digital access, and in particular I would draw your attention to bullet point 3, which is talking about us making provision for all children with different ratios of provision across primary 1 to primary 6. The next paragraph that I would refer you to in particular is at 4.3, which sets out that for the 9.6 million, we would intend to invest 3.6 in the current year. That's the most pressing item of business for today's emergency executive. That would allow us to make an investment almost immediately starting in early June to provide us with devices that can be allocated on a phased basis over the course of the next year. But the first devices would be rolled out from the resumption of the school term after August. I think members are probably well versed in the content of this report, and I've had some correspondence around questions around the report already with some members, so I don't intend to prolong my input at this stage, but would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Robert. Councillor McHugh, you want to speak to the report?
Thanks, convener. Can I just take this opportunity at this moment in time to thank Robert and his team for the incredible work that they have put in organising through this emergency situation we're in. I'd also like to thank every single member within every single member of staff within Children's Services for them hitting the ground running, for them just getting on with the job, putting themselves in harm's way, some of them, to support our families right across the district and to support our communities. So thank you so much. Going on to the report. I think this COVID-19, this pandemic that we're in, has showed us so much how we need to get moving with our digital learning. Most of us have attended the briefings. Most of us are well versed in ahead. The dreadful situation that we're in now has highlighted and brought to the forefront that we need digital learning and we need the technology for each and every one of our learners. As we move forward, I believe digital learning will increase parental involvement to engage. We've spoke various times in the past about subject choices and how digital learning will improve subject choices, but actually this digital learning that we're talking about now will improve engagement with every single one of our children and their families. It'll improve parental engagement, and it'll actually change the way our children learn for the future and will prepare them for the tasks within the future. So I fully support this report and I move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I was going to ask a question that may well have already been asked, and hopefully Robert will then have the answer. Knowing that we are going to have to look at social distancing being something that's going to become part of the new norm going forward, and in order to be able to get as many of our young people engaged, quite possibly in a blended form of learning by the time the new term starts in August, is there the ability to maybe move some of this forward at a faster pace in order that we can have more of the equipment available and in use and have the teachers geared up to be able to do all of that by the time we actually get to the point where we can get our young people back in a more formal engaged learning environment.
The procurement of the devices will start almost immediately following today's meeting. There, as you know, there was a 5-year programme and there was an original plan for rolling out devices across our school estate. You'll see, I think it's at paragraph 4.3, that the initial capital is 3.6 million for the year 2021, but there's a further 1.5 million for the following year. Were we to have the latitude to spend some of the year 2 money together with the year money, we could do more quickly in terms of that rollout of, in particular, devices. I don't know that we could do a more accelerated rollout of the infrastructure upgrade in terms of Wi-Fi, but we could certainly move more quickly in terms of getting devices into children's hands. Plans are in place for training for staff, for parents, for pupils, and we're arranging online sessions for parents of those young people who will be the first to receive these items, and there's already a training programme for staff up and running in advance of the decision being made. So in short, convener, the answer is, if we had the latitude to spend some of the year 2 capital and accelerate that forward, we could purchase further devices and hit more children more quickly, if that was agreed.
Convener.
Thank you for that, Robert. That was helpful. Councillor Alexander?
I need a wee bit of legal advice here, Convener. So going to the report, it's a positive report. I didn't think about the full implications for myself. And I'd like to ask Robert, Mr. Moody, for some advice with regards to my daughter's position as an IT teacher in a Falkirk school. Would I have to declare an interest in that?
I think on the face of it, the answer to that is no. I don't see any obvious financial interest in relation to a close family member arising from that. So, summary, no.
Okay, appreciate that. Thanks very much.
Okay, I'm happy to second the report as it is, but I would reserve that perhaps, depending on the progress of the proposed rollout, that if there is a need to look at augmenting that, then that could be brought back to members for a future consideration. Councillor Bissett, you wanted to speak?
Thanks, convener. I would just like to say that this is a fantastic report, and we fully support it going forward. And we've had excellent briefings from officers and from teachers, and we had the pupils came in and demonstrated exactly what it can do. And we've all recently seen, and we can see at this moment, how effective communication can be over a digital platform. The educational needs of our children is paramount, and this transformative learning change is something that just needs to happen or be left behind. So we agree to make recommendations, and I would also say that I think we should perhaps look at giving some latitude to year 2, and if that can be dipped into if necessary to move the project forward, then I think that's something we need to discuss. The only other thing I wanted to ask Mr. Naylor was the savings outlined on page 22 of 7.937 million. Does he think he'll still make these savings?
Robert?
That is the ambition of the project. I think the situation at the moment in terms of what our expenditure is likely to be as a result of COVID means that there are certain areas of the Children's Services budget where the costs are going to go up, but the savings that we intended to target from the rollout of this initiative fundamentally would have given us opportunities to deliver deliver for children with additional support needs in a different way. And the key component of the savings would come from different curricular models, particularly in the senior phase. As Councillor McHugh already alluded to, there will now be opportunities to deliver some senior courses in a completely different way, in terms of the balance between children learning online as opposed to learning in traditional classroom setups. So in short, my answer to that is that remains the ambition, but I would caveat it with, it depends on how quickly we can move to get this in place and rolled out, and it also depends on a number of other factors that are impinging on our service delivery at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I've got Councillor Coombs and then I'll come to Councillor Munro. Councillor Coombs.
Question. The report, as we've all agreed, is, you know, it is a good report and it is what we've already agreed in the budget. But what I was worrying about was the effectiveness of the remote learning, albeit that what we've been doing for the past 2 months isn't what's envisaged in the plans for Connecting Falkirk. But from what I'm hearing from both parents and teacher friends is that it hasn't been hugely successful. Again, I appreciate that it's been done on the hoof and it's great that there has been some element of teaching and teachers are doing their best. But a lot of the teachers that I'm speaking to on a casual basis are saying that they're not getting the engagement and it's nowhere near the level of learning that the pupils would be getting in a classroom. And I just wondered, what are we doing to measure, you know, what's being given and what's being taken by the pupils during the current crisis?
I think Councillor Coombs, that's a fair comment. What we know is that we have a mixed picture across the estate. I would say that the schools that had commenced this journey sooner and have some provision of kit in a similar way to what's being proposed here, learning for some cohorts of children has continued with daily plans, with daily engagements with key teachers. In the primary sector, that has been good in some areas, but there have been and continue to be challenges around the engagement both of pupils and parents in some regards. What we have been doing since the start of this is that it's acknowledged in the report that there's a significant learning and development need for our teachers across the board. We have some, as you know, nationally accredited experts in this field, but it would be unfair to say that we've got anything near the level of teacher expertise in what we have ambition to be delivering shortly. And what that has meant that is that in recent weeks, the consistency of both the offer, but particularly the uptake of the offer, has been inconsistent across the piece. And what we would be hoping to do as we move forward is target those who have not engaged thus far. And the crucial thing around that will be being able to make contact with whatever staged reopening of schools we have, hopefully prior to the summer, whereby we can be having that dialogue directly with the parents about what it is that we would wish to be doing in terms of learning when children are not physically in school.
Councillor Coombs, does that answers.
I'm glad to hear that we're going to be doing something before the summer, because as you've said, there are a lot of children that are not engaging, and a lot of parents, for a variety of reasons, don't feel comfortable with either the IT system or with dealing on a close relationship with education people and teachers. And I think that it is important that we get that sorted in the long run because of the communication Falkirk, but in the short term because of the loss of the learning that's going on. If we leave it until after the summer recess, it's just too long for some of these pupils, and they'll be getting, moved back a year's work. That's fine, thanks.
Robert, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, it's just to see in that context, and just for members, I suppose, information at this stage, what we as a service have been doing in recent weeks, and it links back to the last report in terms of a recovery plan. We have been looking at all the various possibilities for return, the prioritised groups that we would wish to have back first. That has focused around vulnerable children. It's also focused on the children who would be about to enter P1, and in particular the children who would be making the transition from primary 7 into secondary school. We've been looking at a variety of different models depending on what the social distancing advice is, whether that changes or improves. So for example, in primary schools, we have looked at how many children could we have in on any one day if we had to maintain a 1:5 ratio, or a 1:8 ratio, or a 1:10 ratio. We've also already had officers going to certain schools, and they have physically mocked up what a school might look like in terms of access and egress, what the arrangements would be around, for example, toileting and hand washing, what would be the arrangements in terms of children entering classrooms, and what would be the spacing that would take place within classrooms and indeed within playgrounds. So that work is ongoing, but critically, I think the decision around whether schools open or not prior to the summer will be something that comes from national government, and that will be, as we have talked about already this morning, caveated by advice from health and others about the art of the possible. All of the arrangements are complex. We will continue to need to provide childcare for key workers, as well as beginning to open schools. And we also have to take into account the operational arrangements that will apply to those who provide us with home to school transport, and indeed transport for children with additional support needs. So just in terms of Councillor Coombs' comment, it's absolutely our aspiration to be engaging with children and families as soon as we possibly can in a face-to-face basis. In the meantime, that is happening either through similar means to what we are using today, or by telephone, and we have contact as appropriate with our most vulnerable families. In some cases that's every day, in some cases that's every week, but we are in contact with all of those children that have been identified as being ones that there are some concerns around. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Robert. Councillor Munro.
That some 30% of children are engaging whilst off school, and one of the things I read last week was that in Larbert and areas where they have this system and most children are having digital learning, that figure goes up to 90%. So that in some senses bears out the importance of this system going into all of our schools to encourage children to engage more in the ways in which it's suggested. And my only caveat or anxiety is the one Robert raised over whether or not we're actually going to achieve the savings that are necessary, because there are going to be huge constraints because of the huge costs of COVID on our budgets going forward. And whilst we all find it a very exciting project, it's hugely expensive, something over 16 million. And we know, we can see from the differences between the Larbert schools and other schools that perhaps don't have the system, that it's going to be hugely beneficial, but we still need to think of it in terms of the finance. The other question I have is that because we've had children in school, that children have been looked after where parents were in key jobs, surely we've learned many lessons there from what has been carried out, which can be taken forward when we're going to take children back into the classroom more generally. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Robert, do you want to?
Yeah, that is undoubtedly the case. As members know, we've been operating 7 childcare hubs now for best part of 8 weeks, and there has been a lot of learning from those settings in terms of the activities that children can be involved in, and how we organise activities in order to make sure that both staff and children are safe. So that knowledge of operational practice is currently there. I think what I was alluding to earlier is that within our childcare hubs, we have been operating on a ratio of 1 to 5 in terms of teacher-pupil ratio. My comment earlier was that if that remains the kind of operational guidance that pertains to the reopening of schools, then we could potentially be talking about, at best, children attending school 1 day a week. That would be better than what we have now, and it would certainly allow us to engage with all families and children prior to the summer, and be putting in their hands activities, plans, packs for what it is that we would intend them to be working on over the summer, and indeed on the 4 days where they wouldn't be in school. But as I think Councillor Meiklejohn mentioned, we are looking at an environment now where there will be a blended learning approach, possibly for many months. And certainly my view is that unless something materially changes in terms of contact tracing, vaccines and so on, we could be in a situation where we've got part-time attendance at school almost to Christmas. And in that regard, what will begin to emerge, I think, is that the new normal will be a different balance of schooling. And I also expect that once that different balance of schooling becomes embedded, we will begin to see some efficacy in the approach and the contribution in particular that digital can make. And in that context, I think the Scottish system will have an opportunity to review the concept of school and how it's delivered, where it's delivered, what time it's delivered, what days, weeks and months it's delivered. And in that regard, I see there is a significant opportunity for financial savings moving forward. And that's certainly something that we would be trying to do in the coming weeks and months, is evidence that rather than there being a learning deficit, that the contribution that we can make through this kind of approach will actually, in the longer term, enhance the learning experience.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Convener. To get back to Councillor Coombs' point in relation to the homeschooling, and my wife's currently sitting at home homeschooling my P3 son, and it's not all negative, and it's not all negative within his class, and there is a big uptake within that class of people actually getting involved, participating. A lot of help for the parents as well. The teachers are very, very helpful in giving us assistance, especially at the initial stages with the IT side of things. I think it is something, as Robert says, moving forward for the blended approach, I think it will come into play a great deal. I think this has been a good test bed for that, Robert. I think people are growing all the time. There's more coming on board, certainly with the class that I'm dealing with or I'm involved with. It is testing at times, where we man who would rather be out playing football or whatever in the back garden. But yeah, we're getting there, and it's getting better as time progresses. But what I would like to know, Robert, as this is a sort of test bed sort of situation we've found ourselves in here, will there be some sort of form of benchmarking to see how the kids have progressed? Because that's the only thing we don't know. Is our son progressing a little with our help or not? That's the only thing. We think he is, but we're obviously biased.
I think in terms of measures of progress of children at this stage, I think the individual teachers, and you've mentioned your own son's one, they will have a sense of the level of engagement and the activity that the young people have undertaken and the progress that they are making with the learning that they have been set. But just going back to what I said earlier, I think it will not be until we physically can have contact with children and begin to look at the learning that they have participated in that we will know what progress has been made. One of the concerns that we have, and it goes back to what Councillor Munro was saying, is that those that have had access and have had the benefit of the school being early adopters, there's potential for the gap to be widening. So you mentioned Larbert High School. The senior pupils in Larbert High School will be continuing to move forward through use of Google Classroom and other means. And one of the challenges for us is to just going back to some of the earlier points, is make sure that we've got a universality of that offer and that capacity for all young people to be learning at the same pace and with the same rigor. Obviously, it's a national concern about children being left behind in certain socio-economic groups, and I think people across the board are looking to find ways in which we could have the kind of benchmarking that you're referring to, Councillor Garner.
Councillor Garner, you wanted to come back?
No, to say thanks. That's what I was wanting to hear, and hopefully we can make the most out of this situation going forward. Thank
you. I've got Councillor Nimmo, then Councillor Alexander.
Thanks, Convener. It's just a couple of questions for Robert, if I may. If you look at the recommendations at 2.11, there was £9.6 million agreed in the recent capital budget. I'm just wondering why it's listed in the recommendations as provisional, if there was a reason for that. Second question, I spoke to Robert recently and he made me aware of the fact that there might actually be additional funding available from the Scottish Government, but it's still to be finalised. I wonder if you could maybe expand on that slightly. Thanks, Convener.
Robert?
Can you hear me? Sorry, I think I was on mute. Yeah. I think I would refer the first question probably to Mr. Moody, as I understood that the provisional part that's mentioned in the recommendations was that within the original capital plan proposal there was an amendment at council meeting, at the budget meeting as I recall, which is why that it was provisionally agreed, but it was caveated with a subject to agreement of the Education, Children, Young People Executive. So I'll come back to that point. In terms of Scottish Government funding, Councillor Nimmo, that relates to a new initiative that was announced last week. It's called, I think it's called Connected Scotland, and it's a programme of funding that is specifically targeted at families who do not have access to digital. So there's a Scottish Government fund that will be shared with councils, and the intention is that the councils will work to assist families that currently don't have broadband and or don't have access to any kind of kit at all. So it's actually a broader initiative for the community rather than being specifically about children and young people and schools. So it's funding that's more about broader digital inclusion for citizens across the board than it's about education.
Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Robert. Mr. Moody, do you want to answer around the provisional proposal?
Yes, thank you, Convener. And I think Robert has outlined the matter correctly already. If members recall, at the budget meeting of Council, there was additional capital funding generated by the decision to raise council tax by a supplementary level. And there were decisions taken at that meeting on how that additional funding would be spent. But two of those tranches of spending were made subject to further consideration. And one of those was the Connected Falkirk funding. And as Robert said, that was anticipated to be consideration by the Education, Children and Young People Executive, and then referral on to Council. And this consideration today by the Emergency Executive effectively deals with both stages at once. So if the recommendation is agreed today, then the first year spend as set out in paragraph 4 of the recommendation becomes a confirmed decision, so it loses its provisional nature.
Councillor Nimmo, are you happy with that?
That's fine, Convener. Thanks very much.
Okay. Councillor Alexander?
I think we have to be happy with that because clearly it's a bonus. I've noticed just come up on my laptop, low battery, so I may disappear very shortly. But before I go, what I'd like to say, and I've been waiting a wee while longer than I wanted to wait before making this particular comment. There's nothing to panic over. I can see the look of panic in my colleagues' faces. There's nothing to panic over. You'll be aware of the fact that the current portfolio holder for education, Dana, has been off ill for some considerable time. And during that period, it may not have been so noticeable, but I stood in for her. I'd like to place on record my thanks to the officers of the Children's Services Department with regards to the assistance that they gave me during that period of time. I'd also like to say that wherever I went in Falkirk District, everyone had heard of Adana. And the warmth in which she was taken, and the warmth of the comments that came from teachers, pupils, and everyone in between, was quite marked. And so I'd like to put that on record as well, and to say thank you and well done.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander, and I would agree it's good to have Councillor McHugh back with us and in good health, and long may that continue, because I've certainly missed her. Okay, is there any other member, like Councillor Bissett, you want to ask a question?
Thanks, Convener. It's not particularly related to the Connected Falkirk. I just wanted to ask Mr. Naylor regarding since the pupils can't sit exams, how are they going to be awarded grades? Is it going to be based on what they've achieved prior to this lockdown, or how's that going to be done? Thank you.
The Scottish Qualifications Authority have put in place arrangements whereby schools, individual teachers will submit estimate grades for all of the young people that were going to be sitting exams. There's also a checking exercise that will be done in relation to the normative performance of schools in terms of different exams and different presentations. So, for example, my understanding, and I'm not up with the detail of the sort of calculations that will take place around this, but if, for example, you have a school that makes 50 presentations for higher maths every year, and every year there's 30 A's, 10 B's and 10 C's. The estimates will be submitted for the corresponding class this year, and what the SQA will do is they will have a look at those estimates in light of what is the normative performance of a school over an average of three to 5 years, and they will then take a view on the efficacy, if you like, of the estimates that have been submitted. There are also some courses where there is coursework that is a component part of courses, but I think it would be fair to say that there is still some ongoing discussion within between the Scottish Government, the Scottish Qualifications Authority and the Association of Directors of Education, just around the exact detail of the process by which the SQA will arrive at their grades. Teachers are currently working to gather the information that will enable them to submit those estimates, and those estimates will go to the Scottish Qualifications Authority on the 29th of May. But it is the intention of the SQA to be issuing certificates to young people in exactly the same way as in previous years. So from memory, that would be during the course of the first week of August. Young people would be getting awards of Highers and Nationals and so on.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Just to say that I think as information, etc., comes out from central government on things like that, we'll make sure that members are kept up to date with regular briefings on that so that they have an understanding. Councillor McHugh.
Just really to ask Robert, if, is there a plan being put in place for parents? I mean, the digital learning that we're hoping to engage in, the evidence around it is saying that parents and families will engage in a much greater way, an enhancement. But I believe there'll be a lot of parents, just like Joan's highlighted and Paul's highlighted out there, that aren't actually digitally up to scratch themselves to be able to support their so I believe that as part of the programme that there will be briefings and engagements with parents and some form of training parents, which normally would probably, I'd imagine, take place at school assemblies and things like that. But obviously that's not going to be happening in the near future. So has the department looked into how they are going to engage and support parents training? Thanks.
Yes, we have, and you're absolutely right. And in terms of the rollout of this kind of technology, this kind of practice, those that were the early adopters absolutely had training programs for parents. But that was in the old days when they could bring them into assembly halls, as you say, and have face-to-face and hands-on discussion with them. Unfortunately, the current planning that we're doing is about engaging with parents and indeed teachers using remote learning such as we are doing at the moment. That, for the very group that you're talking about, is going to be challenging because we want to have a video conference with parents who have not yet engaged with digital technology to tell them more about digital technology. It becomes a vicious circle. But what we do know is that our schools know they know their families well. They know those that face the most significant challenge around this. And certainly what we're hoping is that if the rules are such that we can be bringing people back into schools, be that staff, be that pupils, albeit on a managed way, then there would also be scope for us to be bringing parents into school with the same social distancing rules as before. And it would be our intention, I think, to be targeting those who are least likely to be able to engage digitally in the first instance. But yes, there are plans developed for staff, pupils, and indeed parents.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. In which case, I think we've had a fair bit of discussion around this. Are we happy to agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. We now move to item 5, which is the outcome of the consultation on school term dates. And again, back to you, Robert.
Thank you, Convener. Hopefully this report will not be as long as the last one. Members will be aware that we sought permission on the other side of Christmas to do a consultation with our parents and staff and indeed pupils on the proposition that we moved to a 2-week October holiday. And that had the consequence of meaning that schools would start back in the summer 1 week earlier than has been the pattern. The part of the reasoning around that was to deliberately shorten the summer holiday period for two reasons. One was the growing and emerging issue of child poverty, so there was an argument there to be shortening the summer holiday, and the second reason was about continuity of learning and the length of time that children were away from school. So that consultation was done, and we had agreement that it would simultaneously be done in Stirling and in Clackmannanshire. You'll see from the report that both councils have done so. However, they have not yet, as we have today, had the opportunity to agree the outcome because their committees have been suspended. So what's being asked today is that as and when both Clackmannanshire and Stirling agree, that I'm given the authority to publish the term rates for session 22-23 as outlined in the report. And just for members' information, the reason that we want to do this in step with Clackmannanshire and Stirling is that we have, in the case of Denny, our denominational provision is within Stirling Council, within St Modens in Stirling, and it's always been the case that the three councils have aligned their term dates so that there's no difficulty there. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, Convener. As you can see, this report is very straightforward, and I welcome it. I welcome it for the fact that we've been speaking about moving to a fortnight in October for quite some years now, and we've finally got to that stage. And reiterating what Robert has just said as well, reducing the summer holiday will help parents and families immensely as children start to struggle towards the end of the summer. So I welcome this report, and you can see there has been a majority of those that did respond, be it parents, pupils and teachers. So, and the fact that we're engaging with Clackmannan and Stirling is an excellent move forward. So I move the report. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. I think many other areas have already looked to do this, and it is beneficial to shorten the summer holidays, particularly for our most vulnerable kids. And if we are committed to closing the attainment gap and having made significant efforts to do that, this would be the right thing to do in that next stage. So I'm happy to second the paper. And Councillor Gardner, you want us to come in?
Thank you, convener. It's to Robert again, obviously. And I see in 4.2, the second bullet point, Stirling Council consulted 10th of January. Report is going to Children and Young People Committee for decision on 23rd of April. I see you said there that you've not heard back from them yet, and it's because the committees have been suspended. Have we any idea of when we'd get this result back from Stirling? Obviously, there is concerns in relation to St Patrick's, which obviously I'm one of the ones that's got the concern. That the parents that I did speak to at St Pat's at the time of this consultation were pretty much fully supportive of it, but obviously with the thought that St Modens has to come on board as well. So I don't know how Stirling have gone. I haven't heard anything back, to be honest. But yeah, it would be good to get that back and it to be the same with us and working in collaboration, because it won't really work for St Pat's if it doesn't.
Just 2 points on that. One, I don't know what emergency committee arrangements have been put in place in Stirling, or when my counterpart intends taking this report. I can find that out and let you know. And the second point I would make is just that this is not particularly pressing business, because we're talking about the term dates for August 22. So the dates for this year and next year are already agreed. So if it takes Stirling another couple of months to get this over the line, I think we can wait for that.
No problem. Thanks very much, Robert.
Councillor Gardner, if it gives you any comfort, the informal feedback from my colleagues at Stirling Council is that they are supportive of it, and the consultation has been of a similar outcome as ourselves and Clackmannan, and I think it is just a case it's got caught up in the formal process. Okay, Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, convener.
It was also discussed at the LNCT last week, and we're alluding to the fact that Stirling also has had a majority in agreement with it, but as Robert has highlighted, it's just been caught up due to the suspension of committees.
Thanks, Adana.
Any other member? Happy to agree?
Great.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we move to our final item 6 on contract standing orders and quick quotes. Mr. Ritchie, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, convener. This is a short report for members to consider, and it's seeking member approval to increase the threshold in which we use quick quotes for works contracts only, and that's to increase the threshold from the current value of £50,000 up to £250,000. Members will see from the report that Scottish Government procurement guidance would allow us to increase the threshold up to £500,000 for works contracts, but we're not asking members to agree to take us that far. The advantages of using quick quotes, well, that's really in the title, I think. By using quick quotes, the tendering process is reduced significantly. We can tender through quick quotes roughly within 2 weeks, rather than going through the formal tendering process where we can be looking at 6-8 weeks to get the tendering process completed. The benefits of that is that it saves time for the council, saves time for companies as well, and of course it gives us the ability to get works on site sooner. That's particularly important when we're talking about doing works in the school estate, and we've already referenced that on the call so far. Our procurement guidelines within the council requires 3 companies to be asked to tender, one of whom, or at least one of whom, should be a company within the Falkirk Council area, wherever that's possible. Not always possible due to specialist nature of works, but wherever possible, one company should be within the council area. In terms of the visibility of these contracts, quick quote awards are notified to members for their information through the information bulletin. Contracts that are awarded up to the value of £250,000 are also notified to elected members through the information bulletin. So there will be no change in the visibility that elected members have by increasing the threshold. And I'll just finish, Convener, on the issue of visibility. And members will recall that usually on a weekly basis there's an email comes out from the procurement team advising committee of contracts that have been are due to be awarded in the value in excess of £500,000, and these emails are starting again this week, so we'll start to again see increased visibility for elected members in procurement matters. Recommendations, Convener, are set out in paragraph 2 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Stritchie. I'm going to go to Councillor Bowes as a portfolio holder. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. I'd like to thank Stuart for bringing what I see as a very sensible proposal forward. I've dealt with procurement projects for a good number of years and have a very good understanding of the procurement through Public Contract Scotland. This is a system that, as I think Stuart's outlined, it can take 2 months, and I hate to tell them, but longer to get to what they call the review stage, which again can take another few weeks itself. To simplify this, Public Contract Scotland introduced quick quotes for projects under certain values. The maximum value of contract advised being 500,000. Stuart is obviously looking at 250,000 as laid out in the report. This allows the council to identify suppliers and invite them to quote for services and supplies within a 2 to 3 week return tender time. It's importantly, and this I know it's not covered in the report, the paperwork for quick quotes tends to be a lot less onerous than a full procurement exercise, and makes it easier for smaller suppliers to become involved in the tender process. I strongly recommend that local suppliers get themselves registered on Public Contract Scotland to see if they can get a chance on these opportunities. This will give Falkirk Council flexibility and a fast turnaround to enable the council to react to the current crisis and the backlog due to the lockdown. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Bowes. I think it's of comfort to know that wherever possible, there will be at least one local supplier on these quick quotes. But it's a very well made point that we should look to encourage as many our local businesses to get into that procurement process so that they can get onto the frameworks for quick quotes, so that we can circulate the money locally. With the likely increase in costs, I hate to mention the Brexit, the issue that costs are going to increase, and that's not off the table. That's still back lingering and working its way on, as well as the implications of the current situation, where we anticipate that there are businesses, sadly, that will go to the wall and then create a monopoly of some suppliers in certain areas. We were not going to necessarily be in control of those costs, but recognising also that the council as a public body can have a real positive impact on the economy at this particular time. I think opening up the procurement of the quick quotes, the levels of the quick quotes, I think is a positive thing, and allows fleet of foot, particularly to the council as an organisation right now. We've heard that social distancing is going to be with us, therefore there's likely to have to be some changes, physical changes within our schools, possibly some of our other buildings as well, in order to be able to accommodate that, and in order to get people back to work as quickly as possible. Then there needs to be that availability, but also in other areas where it's actually going to stimulate and start to circulate money within our local economy. So I'm happy to move the recommendations as in the report. Bissett?
Happy to second.
Right, thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Bissett?
Thank you, Convener. Just on the quick quotes, the current coronavirus has certainly focused our minds with regards to expediting matters quickly and being more efficient and streamlining things. And as Mr. Ritchie said, you know, this will allow works, for example, to be carried out in schools, works that can be reactive, and given normal school holiday opportunities can be constrained. These works can be carried out in a quicker and more effective manner without the need for a full tendering advertising process. And like Councillor Bowes, I've been involved in the tendering process, and I know it can be quite lengthy and stretched to 2, 3, 4 months sometimes. And I know that the Public Scotland contracts database is robust, and there's plenty of background checks on people. And I would encourage contractors in this area to try and get on it as quickly as possible. And I think it would be beneficial for them. And I was glad to hear that there'll be one contractor at least looked at for these quick quotes. And also know that the delegated decision-making provisions in the standing orders, they won't change, and robust checks are already in place to ensure good fiscal prudence. So we agree with the recommendations in the report. Thank you.
Is there any other member? We're happy to agree. Oh, sorry, Councillor Coombs.
Obviously happy to agree with it, but I just wondered if any other members were interested. I'm going to look tonight. I think it's quite interesting what they're doing in North Ayrshire. They've got a community wealth building programme that they're launching this evening to the public, and it basically covers what everybody here is saying today, in as much as we need to keep big spenders like the council. So I think it's either 6 or 6:30 tonight. They're doing something on Facebook. So I just thought I'd throw it in there. It sounds as though they're doing what we're all saying we should be doing, and it might be of interest to see if we could steal some of their ideas. That's all. That was it.
Thank you, Councillor Coombs. Absolutely. No point reinventing the wheel if somebody's already done that, but we're happy to plagiarise or share, perhaps share. Is there any other member? Are we happy to agree? Sorry, Councillor Alexander, you're speaking, but we're not hearing you.
Is that better or is that worse? Can you hear me now? Can you? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Right, I couldn't hear you. Just to say very quickly, you're talking about not reinventing the wheel. I think North Ayrshire have taken that on board, and because many of the projects that are coming through North Ayrshire are very similar to what we're doing in regards to our own infrastructure, particularly in relation to the strategic buildings. So you know, it's good that local government's cooperating with other local authorities, and it's good that we're getting the benefit from them and they're getting the benefit from us. So that's what it should be about. That's what the people of Falkirk District want to see from the politicians. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no other comments in this paper, can we agree?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you, everybody, and well done for having a very constructive and productive meeting for our first one. We will improve, I have no doubt, as we get used to this going forward. But thank everybody, officers and members, for their time and their brevity and their contributions as well. And we can now look forward to the next one. Thank you very much for today. Bye just now.
Thanks to the chair. Thank you.